On that fateful day, as the salty Atlantic breeze blew relentlessly into his face, the seasoned sailor Genoese felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. His flagship, the Santa Maria, was gradually drawing closer to an uncharted shoreline, the distant sands of an island he would come to call San Salvador. It was October 12th of the year 1492, a moment that would forever alter the course of history. Little could Columbus have imagined that his landing on that sandy spit would ignite a chain of events so profound, so far-reaching, that it would inevitably lead to what scientists later would describe as the Columbian Exchange, a complex process of biological and cultural interchange that would reshuffle the very fabric of life on Earth. The repercussions of that day are still felt today, every time we sit down at the dinner table and take a bite of food, contemplating how interconnected and delicate our world has become. That initial encounter was merely the beginning of a vast and tumultuous transformation. Over the subsequent centuries, what came to be known as the Columbian Exchange would cause the extinction of entire civilizations, give rise to new societies, and dramatically alter the diets of billions of people across the globe. It would trigger ecological upheavals, introduce invasive species, and create environmental problems that haunt us even now. But to truly grasp the full scale of this catastrophe, one must look back into deep prehistory, into a time when the world was a vastly different place. To understand the magnitude of what happened after Columbus's landing, we must first retrace the planet's distant past and see what it looked like before that fateful event. Approximately 280 million years before the first Europeans set foot in the Americas, all the land masses of Earth coalesced into a tremendous supercontinent known as Pangaea. This sprawling landmass occupied the majority of the globe, unifying what would later become widely separated continents. Over the following 120 million years, Pangaea began a slow disintegration. Its vast pieces started drifting apart, carving trenches and opening up new oceanic corridors. The Atlantic Ocean, in particular, emerged as a formidable divider between the Americas on one side and the remaining continents on the other. The vast distance that now separates North and South America from Europe, Africa, and Asia had once been a contiguous landmass, one that fostered different evolutionary trajectories for the diverse forms of life that inhabited it. For millions of years following the breakup of Pangaea, the land masses on opposite sides of the newly formed Atlantic developed independently. The biomes and ecosystems evolved in isolation, each with its own unique array of plants and animals. While these regions would eventually become home to vastly different species, they also shared common ancestors from an ancient unified world. This biological divergence would have profound consequences when Europeans reached their shores centuries later. In the Old World, comprising Europe, Asia, and Africa, by the late 15th century, a complex web of ecosystems had developed through long centuries of co-evolution. Human societies had been interacting with domesticated animals for thousands of years. Beasts like cows, horses, pigs, sheep, and goats had become integral to daily life and economic survival, transforming the landscape and shaping cultural practices. These animals provided not only essential resources, milk, meat, eggs, but also served as sources of labour, transportation, and social status. Their presence also meant a constant risk of disease transmission. In fact, many infectious illnesses such as smallpox, measles, typhus, influenza, and the Black Death had long circulated among human populations in Europe and neighbouring regions. Over generations, Europeans had developed immunity, some level of resistance, to many of these illnesses. The survival of those infected depended heavily on the ability of their immune systems to withstand or recover from outbreaks, which paradoxically acted as a natural filter, making European populations gradually more resilient to these diseases. On the other hand, in the New World, what we now call the Americas, the indigenous civilizations had evolved along a vastly different path. Most Native American peoples did not have large domesticated animals comparable to those in the Old World, with the exception of animals like llamas and dogs, which played important but limited roles. Their societies were primarily rooted in agriculture, with a focus on plant cultivation. Crops such as maize, corn, potatoes, tomatoes, pumpkins, beans, cacao, and tobacco formed the backbone of their economies and daily subsistence. Because their relationship with the animal world was markedly different, they lacked the exposure to many of the infectious diseases that had plagued Europeans. Without large herd animals, there was minimal transmission of zoonotic illnesses, those that pass from animals to humans, which often act as catalysts for pandemics. Consequently, these populations did not develop immunity to such diseases, making them highly vulnerable when the microbes arrived. This profound difference in disease exposure and immunity proved to be a pivotal factor in what followed. In the late 15th century, Europe was already a continent of complex political, religious, and economic alliances, seeking new routes and opportunities amid its internal and external challenges. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 had cut off the traditional overland trade routes to the east. The city's capture by the Ottoman Turks meant that merchants from Venice, Genoa, and other Italian city-states could no longer traverse the Silk Roads and trade directly for valuable spices, silk, and other luxury goods from India and China. As a result, European traders were forced to look westward, seeking alternative routes that would eventually lead to the Age of Discovery. The high demand for exotic spices like pepper, cinnamon, and nutmeg, which had become symbols of wealth and luxury, skyrocketed in prices, transforming these commodities into prized possessions, accessible only to the wealthiest classes. This relentless pursuit of material riches and the insatiable appetite for foreign goods helped fuel the ambitious voyages that would soon sweep across the Atlantic. The convergence of geopolitical, economic, and technological factors created the perfect storm, driving Europeans to explore beyond their familiar horizons, seeking new lands and resources. These explorations, while driven by human curiosity and greed, would unlock a series of biological exchanges that would forever alter the biological landscape of the entire planet. Thus, from the distant past, through the breakup of Pangaea, the evolution in isolation of separate ecosystems, and the rise of civilizations in both the Old and New Worlds, the stage was set for an encounter that would lead to catastrophe and renewal alike. The arrival of Europeans in the Americas was not merely a matter of discovering new territories. It was the beginning of a genomic and ecological upheaval that would reshape life on Earth in ways previously unimagined. The story of that encounter is, in essence, the unfolding account of a complex interplay between geography, biology, and human ambition. an epic that continues to influence the world we inhabit today. European monarchs, in their relentless pursuit of new routes and wealth, feverishly scoured the horizon for alternative passageways into Asia. They promised vast riches, unimaginable treasures, and golden fortunes to anyone who could discover a direct maritime route to the lucrative Spice Islands. This fervent quest birthed a climate of intense competition among nations, each eager to stake their claim to the coveted prize. Amidst this atmosphere of urgency and aspiration, the daring navigator Christopher Columbus emerged with a bold and daring plan of his own. Columbus proposed reaching Asia by sailing westward across the vast Atlantic Ocean, a route that deviated sharply from the known and accepted land-based routes. His plan was rooted in a significant miscalculation. He underestimated the true size of the Earth. Columbus, confident in his understanding of geography, believed that the distance from Europe to Asia was approximately 4,000 kilometers, a figure that seemed manageable and promising. In reality, this distance was closer to 20,000 kilometers, a fact that no one yet fully grasped. Most of his contemporaries and the leading maritime powers of Europe regarded his idea with skepticism, partly because Columbus ignored the existence of the American continents, which he had no way of knowing were standing between Europe and Asia. For 5 long years, Columbus fervently sought financial backing to launch his maritime venture. He approached various royal courts, but the response was uniformly dismissive or indifferent. The Portuguese king, after examining Columbus's proposal, dismissed it outright, deeming it foolish and unfeasible. Similarly, the English court showed little interest in supporting what they considered a reckless or misguided enterprise. It was only in Spain that Columbus found an unexpected glimmer of hope, thanks to the determination of the sovereigns, Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon. They had just recently completed the arduous process of the Reconquista, successfully expelling the Moors from the city of Granada, feeling confident and eager for new achievements on the global stage. Their decision to support Columbus was driven by a calculation that, even if unsuccessful, the risk was comparatively small and the potential reward enormous. For Spain, this was a chance to secure a direct pathway to Asian wealth and influence, opening a new chapter of exploration and conquest. On the 3rd of August, in the year 1521, 3 ships set sail from the port of Palos. The flagship, the Santa Maria, was a vessel of considerable size for its time, with a displacement of roughly 200 tons. It was the largest ship among the expedition's fleet. Accompanying her were 2 smaller caravels, the Pinta and the Nina, faster, more agile vessels designed for exploration and rapid movement across the unpredictable open seas. Aboard these ships were around 90 men, sailors, navigators, and adventurers, most of whom had little idea of what awaited them beyond the horizon. Some sailors had been forcibly conscripted, their choices limited to imprisonment or risking the deadly dangers of the ocean. Others were criminals seeking a new beginning, offered the only alternative to incarceration. The initial weeks of the voyage unfolded with an unexpected calm. The ships steered directly westward from the Canary Islands, propelled by the steady trade winds, the prevailing easterly trade winds that seemed to push them effortlessly into the unknown. These early days offered a relative sense of security as the ships maneuvered along familiar currents and wind patterns, moving steadily into uncharted waters. Yet, as the days progressed, tension grew among the crew. The vast emptiness of the open ocean, extending endlessly in all directions, sparked fears and doubts. It was an unfamiliar and intimidating realm for sailors who had rarely ventured beyond the safety of coastal waters, and some began to fear they might never see their homeland again. Columbus found himself under increasing pressure. To maintain control and prevent unrest, he resorted to a veiled form of deception, doubling the recorded distances travelled, effectively downplaying the reality of the voyage's progression. This was a desperate measure, aimed at diffusing mounting fears of insurrection and mutiny. By early October, the atmosphere aboard the ships had become dangerously tense. The crew, driven by anxiety and despair, demanded that they turn back to Spain. They threatened to overthrow Columbus, referred to as the Admiral, and demand their departure from these treacherous waters. Columbus, ever determined to succeed, managed to negotiate an extension of 3 more days, promising that if no land was sighted by then, they would fulfill their original plan to return. The fate of the entire expedition, and perhaps the wider world, hung precariously in the balance. The sailors' fears might have soon been realised, if not for the critical signs of approaching land. Mysterious floating branches with leaves caught in the water, and flocks of birds flying close above the waves. Such natural indicators had long served sailors as signals that land was nearby. Thanks to these clues, an astonishing breakthrough was imminent. It was at 2 o'clock in the early morning hours of the restless 12th of October that the lookout, Rodrigo de Triana, aboard the Pinta, cried out with wild excitement, "Land! Land!" Before the astonished eyes of all, a low-lying sandy island emerged from the fog and the dawn's first light. It was covered with lush tropical vegetation, promising the promise of new worlds. Columbus named this island San Salvador, Holy Saviour, and immediately claimed it for the Spanish crown. Fully convinced that they had discovered islands off the coast of Asia, Columbus remained steadfast in his beliefs. He was utterly convinced that he had reached the distant archipelago near the shores of India. In his mind, the inhabitants they encountered, indigenous people they would later call Indians, were the peoples of the Orient. Columbus believed he was close to the famed Indies, unaware that he had, in fact, stumbled upon an entirely new continent, forever altering the course of history. His unwavering conviction was that he had reached the shores of Asia, and from that day on, he would refer to the indigenous inhabitants as Indians, with the firm belief that he was exploring lands not far from the historic spice markets and the legendary lands of the East. The initial encounter between Europeans and the indigenous peoples of the Americas was surprisingly peaceful, a moment in history that defied the expectations of future violence and conflict. When the first explorers set foot on this vast land, they were met not with hostility, but with curiosity and tentative interest. The local inhabitants, belonging to tribes such as the Lucaya or Taino, greeted these strange visitors with a degree of openness that might seem remarkable given what was to come in the subsequent centuries. Their reaction was fueled by intrigue rather than suspicion, as they were utterly captivated by the Europeans' pale skin, an anomaly in their eyes, and by their beards and unfamiliar clothing, which was entirely outside their own cultural experience. Conversely, the Europeans, upon observing the native populations, were struck by their bronze-coloured skin, the vibrant feathers adorning their garments and the dazzling gold ornaments they wore, which reflected their own fascination with the new and exotic. This mutual fascination heralded the beginning of an exchange, a trade that would unfold amidst the promise of discovery. The initial interactions quickly evolved into trade, a delicate and tentative process of exchange that bridged vastly different worlds. Europeans traded glass beads and shiny metal trinkets, simple objects that appeared as treasures to the indigenous peoples, in hopes of acquiring gold ornaments, rare and beautiful feathers, and exotic fruits that the land offered. This barter, seemingly innocent and idyllic at first glance, concealed the ominous shadow of impending catastrophe. Beneath this veneer of peaceful coexistence lay the inexorable march of destruction that would soon engulf entire civilizations. In that pivotal moment when handshakes were exchanged, sealing what seemed to be a peaceful agreement between Columbus and the Taino chief, a silent and deadly chapter was already taking its terrifying course. The arrival of Europeans in the New World initiated what would become the most catastrophic biological disaster in the history of Earth, a tragedy inscribed not in weaponry or warfare, but in invisible microorganisms carried unwittingly across the ocean. These tiny pathogens, microorganisms unknown to the indigenous populations, began spreading unchecked, bringing with them diseases against which the native peoples had no defense and no immunity. This was a silent invasion, one that would wipe out entire communities long before any physical confrontation. The first signs of this looming tragedy were subtle and slow to manifest. Columbus spent approximately 3 months exploring the waters of the Caribbean, venturing from island to island and establishing initial contact with the local inhabitants. During his voyage, he visited the island of Cuba, mistakenly believing it to be part of the Asian continent, and also explored Hispaniola, which we now know as the present-day Haiti. It was on this island that he founded the first European settlement in the Americas, called Fort Navidad. When the flagship vessel, the Santa Maria, ran aground on December 24th near Hispaniola's shores, its wreckage was salvaged and transformed into a fortress, a symbol of European ambitions. The survivors, numbering 39 men, remained behind to protect this outpost under Columbus's orders, anchoring the European presence in the New World. When Columbus returned to Spain in March of the following year, he carried with him not only gold, exotic plants, and curious artifacts, but also a handful of indigenous people, Taino and others, who served as living proof of what he considered a great discovery. These early encounters seeded a narrative of triumph and success, but beneath this veneer of achievement, a darker truth was beginning to unfold. The Europeans' arrival did not only introduce commerce and new goods, it also unwittingly released a hellish wave of infectious diseases that spread rapidly through the native populations. These illnesses, smallpox, measles, influenza, typhus, bubonic plague, cholera, malaria, and yellow fever, were brutal, invisible enemies that devastated entire communities. Whole tribes were decimated within a matter of years, their populations falling victim to the deadly infectious agents carried across the Atlantic, against which they had no immunity and no means of defense. The story of the explorers' impact quickly turned from curiosity to horror once the consequences of their voyage became clear. News of the discovery of new lands spread across Europe with lightning speed. The Spanish monarchs, enthralled by the prospect of wealth and glory, responded by organising even larger and more ambitious expeditions. By September of the year 1493, Columbus set sail once more, this time commanding a formidable fleet of 17 ships with a crew numbering 1,200 men. Unlike the initial voyage, which was primarily exploratory, this second expedition was designed explicitly for colonization, an expansive and aggressive effort to claim and settle these new lands. Upon Columbus's return to Hispaniola, he was shocked and horrified to find the settlement he had left behind in ruins. The fort of Navidad was nothing more than a smouldering ruin, and the 39 men he had entrusted with its defence were either dead or missing. The indigenous people, recalling their own suffering and witnessing the brutality inflicted by the Europeans, recounted horrifying accounts of abuse, including violent clashes, theft, and the forced exploitation of native women. These atrocities ignited conflicts that led to the complete annihilation of the outpost's garrison, serving as a stark warning of the destructive consequences that would follow. Undeterred by this grim outcome, Columbus founded a new settlement named Isabella, which he envisioned as the hub of a systematic effort to colonize the island. It was during this period that what would become known as the Columbian Exchange truly began, an unprecedented biological and cultural transfer between the Old World and the New. The exchange involved not only goods such as plants, animals, and precious metals, but also the transfer of diseases and human populations. It was a transformation that would forever alter the biological makeup and ecological balance of both hemispheres. Among the most devastating elements of this exchange were the deadly pathogens, diseases that travelled across the Atlantic in the wake of European exploration. Smallpox, measles, influenza, typhus, bubonic plague, cholera, malaria, and yellow fever. These were not mere ailments, but destructive forces that arrived as biological weapons, sweeping through the indigenous societies with devastating speed and brutality. Their impact was catastrophic, akin to a tsunami of death that engulfed the native peoples, decimating populations at an unparalleled rate. This silent but lethal invasion effectively erased entire civilizations, forever changing the demographic and biological landscape of the Americas, with consequences that would echo through history for centuries to come. Native Americans lacked any natural genetic resistance to the deadly diseases brought to the continent by European explorers, a resistance that had been gradually developed over centuries of exposure to similar illnesses in Europe and other parts of the Old World. This absence of immunity made the consequences of contact catastrophic and unprecedented in human history. Smallpox, which in Europe had become a familiar scourge that mostly affected children and was often survived, leaving individuals with lifelong immunity, turned into a merciless, insidious killer among the indigenous populations of the Americas. The disease manifested with high fever and a characteristic rash that quickly developed into painful, pus-filled ulcers, ultimately leading to death in a large majority of those infected. While in Europe, the mortality rate among smallpox victims was generally around 30%, among the native peoples, it soared to terrifying levels, sometimes exceeding 90%. Entire tribes, with their populations decimated within weeks after the first symptoms appeared, vanished in a matter of days, leaving behind nothing but desolation and ghostly remnants of once thriving communities. Much the same fate befell measles, a disease which Europeans regarded as a childhood illness, one from which most children recovered and subsequently acquired lifelong immunity. To Europeans, measles was a manageable, even benign part of childhood. However, for the indigenous peoples of the Americas, it was a relentless and devastating predator that spanned all ages, striking down men and women of various generations with ruthless efficiency. When measles reached isolated tribes, its toll was catastrophic, sometimes wiping out up to 80% of their entire populations in a matter of weeks, if not days. It was not solely smallpox or measles that inflicted suffering. Typhus, carried by lice and fleas that had stowed away on European ships, brought a different kind of horror, turning living bodies into walking corpses. High fever, delirium, and a widespread rash tormenting the entire body culminated in agonizing mortality that left families broken and communities in mourning. The flu, initially perceived as a simple common cold, became an agent of death in its own right, claiming thousands of lives among the indigenous tribes. It spread rapidly through the dense populations, often carried by trade routes and raids, further weakening the already ravaged societies. Even the spectre of the bubonic plague, famously known as the Black Death in medieval Europe, found hospitable ground in the Americas, rapidly spreading through towns and villages that had no prior exposure or defences. These outbreaks, however, paled in comparison to the destruction wrought by synchronized epidemics involving multiple deadly diseases striking at the same time. When several illnesses attacked a community simultaneously, mortality rates could approach nearly 100%, leaving behind only the skeletal remains of what once was vibrant life. The surviving individuals, often too weak to fulfill basic community needs, found themselves incapacitated. They could not tend to the sick, bury the dead, or secure food. Entire settlements turned into ghost towns, silent and desolate, with decaying corpses lying among half-starved, half-dead survivors, wandering aimlessly amid the ruins. The scale of this demographic catastrophe defies straightforward comprehension. Conservative estimates suggest that before European contact, the population of the Americas ranged between 50 and 100 million people. In the century and a half following Christopher Columbus's landing, this number plummeted by between 80 and 95%. In absolute terms, this means that between 40 and 90 million indigenous lives were lost, more than the combined casualties of all the conflicts and wars of the 20th century, in numbers far exceeding the total casualties of that entire period. Certain regions experienced even more dramatic devastation. The Caribbean, where Columbus first made landfall, saw nearly complete annihilation of its native inhabitants. The island of Hispaniola, which, at the dawn of European arrival, was inhabited by somewhere between 300,000 and 1 million indigenous people, was reduced to a handful of survivors by the middle of the 15th century. Most of the other Caribbean islands were similarly depopulated, their indigenous populations wiped out or driven away, leaving the land virtually uninhabited. In Mexico, the mighty Aztec Empire, home to between 15 and 25 million people, began a rapid decline that in a century reduced its population to roughly 1 or 2 million. The once impressive city-state of Tenochtitlan, with its population of 200 to 300,000 inhabitants, was reduced to ruins, with only a few thousand survivors scrambling among the debris. Similarly, in Peru, the Inca Empire, initially numbering somewhere between 10 and 12 million residents, suffered devastating demographic losses. The highland valleys of the Andes, which had cultivated complex civilizations for centuries, fell silent and empty as epidemics swept through. City after city abandoned because their inhabitants fled from deadly diseases. Even in North America, where European colonization began later and more gradually, infectious diseases travelled ahead of the settlers along extensive trade and communication routes, moving swiftly from tribe to tribe. Native communities, isolated and unprepared, suffered tremendous losses from the onslaught of new illnesses that they had no means to combat. The scale of devastation was staggering, and in many cases, entire cultures and societies were irrevocably shattered, leaving behind a landscape marked by abandonment, decay, and silence. In sum, the impact of these diseases was not merely a series of isolated tragedies, but an overarching, relentless force that reshaped the very fabric of the American continent. The demographic collapse was so profound that it forever transformed the historical and cultural landscape of the New World, leaving behind scars that would be felt for generations to come. When the first British settlers arrived in Virginia during the early 15th century, they encountered vast stretches of land that had once been home to numerous indigenous tribes. Over time, however, these territories had become desolate and abandoned, leaving behind open and seemingly empty landscapes. The native peoples they encountered called these areas the lands of the dead, a name that reflected their profound understanding of the tragedy that had befallen their communities. The devastation experienced by these tribes was compounded by their lack of knowledge regarding the nature of the diseases that arrived with the Europeans. Indigenous medicine, which relied heavily on herbal remedies and spiritual rituals, proved utterly powerless against the onslaught of these new illnesses, such as smallpox and tuberculosis. Their traditional healing practices, which included medicinal brews and ceremonial treatments, could not halt the rapid spread of these deadly plagues. Moreover, some of the methods they employed in attempts to cure or purge illness, for example, the use of high-temperature sweat baths, sometimes worsened their condition, accelerating death rather than preventing it. As epidemics ravaged their populations, many indigenous tribes misinterpreted these outbreaks as divine retribution or as the result of witchcraft perpetrated by the Europeans. Such beliefs often led to widespread panic, social breakdowns, and the disintegration of established leadership structures. Chiefs and spiritual leaders, who normally guided their communities and maintained order, succumbed to the diseases alongside ordinary members of their tribes, leaving survival without direction. Shamans and occults, once believed to wield potent influence over the spiritual realm, found themselves powerless in the face of these unfamiliar and merciless illnesses. The survivors faced a crisis of faith, often losing trust in their traditional gods and disappeared customs as they grappled with the relentless onslaught of death. In some cases, the Europeans didn't merely accidentally introduce these deadly pathogens, they deliberately employed them as weapons. Historical records from the year of our Lord 1763 tell of British officers during the siege of Fort Pitt passing contaminated items, specifically bedding and clothing from a hospital contaminated with smallpox, intentionally in an effort to infect and weaken the besieged indigenous defenders. This act marked one of the earliest documented instances in history where biological warfare was employed as a tool of warfare, illustrating a cruel and calculated use of disease to subdue opponents. However, the Columbian exchange was not limited to merely the transfer of pathogenic microorganisms. Europeans also brought with them a wide array of animals, many of which radically transformed North American ecosystems and landscapes over time. Perhaps most impactful were the equines, horses that had been long extinct on the continent for approximately 10,000 years since their disappearance at the end of the last ice age. Their reintroduction by Europeans ignited a fundamental revolution in the lives of many indigenous peoples. Once the horses arrived on the sprawling plains of North America, their influence on native cultures was profound and far-reaching. Tribes such as the Comanche, Shoshone, Sioux, and many others shifted from predominantly terrestrial, walking societies into highly mobile, horseback-centric cultures. The reintroduction of the horse allowed these tribes to enhance their hunting efficiency, especially when pursuing bison, the cornerstone of their sustenance and livelihood for generations. With the ability to cover enormous distances swiftly, indigenous warriors could strike more effectively, engage in faster communication across vast territories, and conduct raids and wars with unprecedented speed and coordination. The iconic image of the plains warrior, adorned with feathers, riding a horse across the endless prairies, became a defining symbol that emerged only after the Columbian exchange. The horse did not simply change transportation, it reshaped social structures, warfare, and even spiritual practices among these communities. The arrival of large cattle herds and livestock, carried over by Spanish explorers and settlers, brought about an equally significant transformation of the American environment. Cattle, specifically cows and bulls, were introduced into the continent and, upon release into open ranges, faced little natural predators and harsh conditions, leading to rapid and unchecked population growth. Over time, vast herds of wild cattle, known as mustangs, and feral bison roamed freely across the prairies, vying with native species for grazing land and water resources. In certain regions, these introduced herds grew so large that they pushed native fauna to the brink of extinction, drastically altering the region's ecological balance. Wild pigs, introduced to North America by European settlers primarily for hunting and food, proved especially destructive to the indigenous ecosystems. These omnivorous animals exhibited remarkable adaptability, consuming anything available: roots, fruits, bird eggs, young animals, and even carcasses, making them highly invasive. Their swift reproduction rates and broad diet enabled them to spread aggressively across various terrains, transforming them into a serious threat to native plant and animal species. On many Caribbean islands, for example, feral pigs effectively wiped out several endemic plants and animal species, eradicating entire populations of unique flora and fauna. Similarly, goats and sheep, brought over by explorers and settlers, contributed considerably to environmental degradation in the Americas. Their grazing habits often resulted in overuse of pastures, leading to soil erosion, especially in mountainous regions, severely damaging the local ecosystems. On the Galapagos Islands, also known as the Galapago Islands, which various Spanish ships visited over the centuries, goats overgrazed the scant vegetation, putting at risk the survival of various endemic species, including the renowned Galapagos giant tortoise. Their voracious feeding habits transformed these fragile environments into barren landscapes, threatening the very existence of the unique animals that had evolved there over countless generations. In summary, the Columbian Exchange initiated a cascade of ecological, cultural, and biological changes across the American continent. It brought devastating diseases that decimated indigenous populations and traditional ways of life, while simultaneously introducing new animals that reshaped the very fabric of North American ecosystems. The horses and cattle revolutionized transportation, hunting, and societal organization among native tribes, while invasive species like pigs, goats, and sheep caused widespread ecological upheaval, often leading to the decline or extinction of native species. These complex processes exemplify how contact between distant worlds can produce profound and lasting transformations, both devastating and transformative, shaping the history and environment of the Americas for centuries to come. Even domesticated animals such as cats and dogs, initially brought to the New World by European settlers, eventually became a source of ecological upheaval for the native fauna of the Americas. These animals, when they escaped or were abandoned into the wild, began hunting local birds and small mammals. In the absence of natural predators or evolved defenses, these indigenous species struggled to survive against the voracious predators they had no prior exposure to. Wild cats, having escaped from their human owners or farms, often prowled the forests and plains, preying on vulnerable native birds and small rodents that had evolved in relative safety within their specific habitats. Similarly, dogs that had formed packs or lived in human settlements sometimes formed feral groups, roaming in the wilderness and attacking local wildlife. These interactions created new pressures on the fragile balance of native ecosystems. However, human influence on the fauna did not occur solely from animals migrating from Europe into the Americas. The reverse migration was also a significant factor. Species native to the Americas were transported across the Atlantic to Europe and beyond. Although fewer in number compared to the European animals that found their way to the New World, some of these species played a crucial role in shaping the ecological and cultural landscape of the Old World. One of the most notable examples was the turkey, originally domesticated by the indigenous peoples of what is now Mexico and Central America, specifically by the Aztecs, Incas, and other civilizations. Known locally by the name Mexico or Huayco, the turkey was first introduced into Europe during the 15th century, shortly after European explorers encountered it in the Americas. The bird's arrival quickly captivated Europeans. It was embraced not only as a curiosity, but soon became a staple of their culinary traditions. By the end of the 15th century, roasted turkey had become firmly established as a traditional dish during European holiday celebrations and official feasts, symbolizing the New World's contribution to Old World cuisine. Alongside birds, small mammals native to the South American continent, such as guinea pigs, also migrated to Europe. Indigenous to the Andean highlands and domesticated by civilizations like the Incas, these creatures were initially raised primarily for meat. The Incas, who cultivated and bred guinea pigs, locally called cuy, raised them in pens and viewed them as an important source of protein. They were kept in special enclosures called vandas, which resembled small sheds. When transported to Europe, these animals experienced a different fate. Instead of becoming a dietary staple, guinea pigs were quickly adopted as pets and companions in European households. Over time, they also found a place in scientific laboratories, becoming valuable subjects for experiments in biology and medicine. Their gentle nature and manageable size made them popular laboratory animals, and they played a significant role in scientific advancements. The exchange of plants between Europe and the Americas proved to be even more transformative and far-reaching than the movement of animals. Europeans introduced to the New World several essential crops, such as wheat, rice, barley, and other grains, that would eventually become fundamental to American agriculture. These crops, originating from the Old World, had varying degrees of success in different American climates. Wheat, for example, proved well suited to the temperate zones of North America, particularly in regions with moderate rainfall and fertile soil. It thrived there, ultimately leading to the development of enormous wheat fields and expansive grain plantations that became central to the agricultural economy of the continent. However, in the tropical regions of Central America and parts of South America, wheat was less successful because the climate was less compatible with its growth requirements. Conversely, crops like maize, corn, already native to the Americas, became crucial to European diets after their gradual adoption. The introduction of sugarcane from Asia via Europe sparked one of the most revolutionary changes in the economic and social fabric of the Americas. Originally cultivated in Southeast Asia and India, sugarcane found fertile ground in the Caribbean and coastal regions of Brazil. The vast sugar plantations established in these areas quickly became economic powerhouses, fueling Europe's demand for refined sugar and transforming the Caribbean into a hub of large-scale production. This rapid growth, however, came with a dark side. An insatiable demand for labour led to the forced migration of more than 12 million Africans across the Atlantic. These individuals, torn from their homelands and subjected to brutal conditions, were forcibly transplanted to American plantations to work tirelessly in the cultivation and processing of sugar. The transatlantic trade in enslaved Africans thus became a tragic, defining feature of this period, deeply intertwined with economic exploitation and human suffering. Coffee, which originated in Ethiopia and the surrounding regions, entered the global arena through a complex chain of exchanges. From its birthplace in the Ethiopian highlands, coffee spread through the Arabian Peninsula, particularly via trade routes passing through Yemen and Persia, reaching Europe and then the Americas. The climate conditions in parts of Central and South America proved to be particularly well suited for coffee cultivation. Large-scale coffee plantations arose in Brazil, especially in the states of São Paulo and Minas Gerais, as well as in Colombia and other Central American countries. These plantations quickly became cornerstone industries for these regions, supporting local economies and establishing a global market for coffee. The coffee produced in the Americas came to dominate international trade, with the beverage becoming an everyday commodity for millions worldwide. Its popularity catalyzed the growth of a significant industry, shaping trade policies and social customs across the continents. European settlers also transported grapevines, along with citrus fruits such as oranges and lemons, into the New World. These crops succeeded remarkably well in certain climates, especially in regions like California, Chile, and Argentina. These areas, thanks to their favourable conditions, think Mediterranean-like climates, became prominent producers of wine and citrus fruits. The vineyards of California, with their sprawling wineries, emerged as major competitors to traditional European wine regions, producing high-quality wines that gained international acclaim. Similarly, vineyards in Chile and Argentina developed robust winemaking industries, establishing these nations as significant players in the global wine market. The successful adaptation of grapevines and citrus crops in these regions not only boosted local economies, but also diversified the agricultural landscape of the Americas, aligning them with the traditional European style of viticulture. Yet, perhaps the most remarkable transformation in global cuisine was brought about by the introduction of American plants into the Old World. Among these, the potato stands out as one of the most consequential. Originating from the Andean mountains, the potato was cultivated by indigenous peoples for centuries before Europeans encountered it. When introduced into Europe during the 16th century, it initially faced skepticism and resistance. The Native Americans had long considered the tuber a vital staple, but Europeans viewed the plant with suspicion and distrust. Its roots grow beneath the soil, which was seen as unnatural or suspicious, and the plant's above-ground parts, lighter greens and stems, were often mistaken for poisonous or harmful. Furthermore, because the leaves and stems contain toxins, early Europeans often experienced poisoning if they mistakenly consumed these parts. As a result, for about 2 centuries, the potato was primarily cultivated as an ornamental plant or used as feed for livestock, rather than as a food crop. It was not until the 17th and 18th centuries that the potential of the potato as a reliable and nutritious food source was gradually recognized. The turning point came in the mid-17th century, when a visionary French agronomist named Antoine Augustin Parmentier began to champion the potato as a staple food. Parmentier understood the importance of changing public perception and devised strategies to promote its acceptance. He organized dinners featuring potato-based dishes, planted fields of potatoes near Paris to showcase their abundance and potential, and disseminated information about their nutritional value. Gradually, the potato gained legitimacy and popularity among European populations, eventually becoming a vital component of their diets and a key element in combating food shortages and famine during periods of hardship. The journey of the potato from a suspicious tuber to a fundamental agricultural product exemplifies the profound transformations triggered by the exchange of crops between the New and Old Worlds, ultimately reshaping the culinary and agricultural landscapes across continents. During the day, he would set up protective guards around the potato fields, ensuring their safety from potential threats, only to dismantle those same defences come nightfall. This routine, seemingly simple at first glance, hid a deeper story of human curiosity and recklessness. As the guards withdrew in the evening, inquisitive peasants, believing they were safeguarding something truly valuable, took the opportunity to steal a few tubers. Seeing the potential in this nutritious crop, they began planting stolen potato bulbs on their own plots of land. Over time, what started as sporadic thefts gradually turned into a widespread practice. By the late 15th century, the potato had firmly established itself as a staple food for millions across Europe, with its significance especially pronounced in Ireland. This humble root vegetable, characterized by its high yield and nourishing qualities, made it possible to feed many more people than ever before, using the same amount of cultivated land. The increased productivity of potato farming played a crucial role in fueling a population explosion across the continent. Within just 2 centuries, Europe's demographic numbers swelled remarkably, several times larger than they had been. However, this reliance on a single crop proved to be a tragic vulnerability when, in the year 1845, Ireland faced a terrible crisis as a fungal disease known as Phytophthora infestans, or the potato blight, devastated its crops. The entire nation was plunged into a catastrophic famine. The blight's relentless destruction of potato fields led to the death of approximately 1 million Irish people over the next 5 years, mainly from starvation and disease. Meanwhile, another 2 million Irish citizens, desperate to escape the suffering, migrated across the Atlantic to seek refuge in America. This famine, often called the Great Irish Hunger, was a direct consequence of the broader Columbian Exchange, a historical interchange that vastly transformed global agriculture and diets. Just as potatoes revolutionized European society, maize, or corn, fundamentally altered farming practices across the Old World. Originating from Mexico, where it had been domesticated roughly 9,000 years ago, maize possessed an extraordinary adaptability that made it suitable for diverse climates. It could flourish in tropical regions as well as in temperate zones, producing abundant harvests. Initially, the introduction of maize into Europe was met with some difficulty, as Europeans were unsure of how to prepare this new crop properly. Indigenous peoples in the Americas processed maize by treating it with lime or ashes, a technique that increased the bioavailability of niacin, vitamin B3, thus preventing nutritional deficiencies. Europeans, unfamiliar with these methods, often consumed maize in its raw form, which sometimes led to pellagra, a disease caused by niacin deficiency. Over time, though, Europeans learned to work with maize, integrating it into their cuisine. The Italians, for instance, began making polenta, a hearty porridge from boiled ground maize, while in Romania, a similar dish called mamaliga became a dietary staple. Its high carbohydrate content made maize an essential source of fodder for livestock as well, facilitating an increase in animal husbandry and meat production. The influence of maize extended further into Africa, where it sparked a true agricultural revolution. It provided significantly higher yields than traditional African grains such as millet and sorghum. Its resilience in regions with irregular rainfall, combined with rapid maturation, made maize an invaluable crop, contributing to population growth and transforming dietary patterns across the continent. In Asia, maize also found a prominent place. In China, it became an important crop in mountainous regions where rice, the traditional staple, could not be cultivated. With maize, new arable lands could be developed, supporting the increasing needs of a growing population. Similarly, the path of the tomato from the New World to Old World cuisine was both fascinating and full of misconceptions. Initially, Europeans regarded tomatoes with suspicion, believing them to be toxic plants due to their botanical family, Solanaceae, which includes highly poisonous species like deadly nightshade or belladonna. The early toxic reputation partly stemmed from the fact that tomato plants, when grown in certain types of pewter or lead-soldered copper vessels common among wealthy Europeans, could cause lead poisoning from the acids they contained. It's important to understand that tomatoes themselves are not inherently poisonous. Rather, their acidity facilitated lead poisoning if consumed in certain conditions. For a long time, tomatoes were cultivated solely for decorative purposes, appreciated more for their bright appearance than their culinary potential. It was not until the 15th century that Italians began to experiment with cooking tomatoes, discovering their incredible versatility. By the 19th century, tomatoes had become an indispensable part of Italian cuisine, forming a foundation for their iconic sauces and dishes like pizza. Today, it's difficult to imagine the culinary traditions of Italy, and indeed many Mediterranean countries, without the richness that tomatoes bring. Yet, this beloved fruit originated in distant America, where it was initially considered somewhat exotic and mysterious. Similarly transformative was the chili pepper, which revolutionized kitchens across the Old World. This fiery spice, native to the Americas, had a profound impact on regional cuisines, adding flavor and heat that hadn't been widespread in European or Asian cooking before. The chili's introduction to Europe and Asia marked the beginning of new culinary traditions, influencing countless dishes and flavor profiles. The introduction of various vital and flavorful plants, spices, and substances into global cuisine and daily life was a complex and fascinating process, driven by exploration, conquest, and cultural exchange. Among the earliest and most impactful contributors to this exchange were the spicy pods, known as chili peppers, which had been domesticated in Mexico. From their origins in the Americas, these fiery fruits traveled across oceans and continents, arriving in Asia and Africa through the hands of Spanish and Portuguese explorers. As they found their way into new lands, they became a fundamental ingredient in many traditional dishes, transforming regional cuisines and elevating countless recipes to new levels of flavor and heat. In many Asian nations, such as India, Thailand, China, and Korea, the spicy pepper didn't just add seasoning, it became the backbone of the national culinary identity. Many dishes that we now consider staples of their respective culinary traditions could not have existed in their current form until the arrival of the American chili, which introduced a depth of piquancy that defined entire cuisines. Alongside these fiery pods, another revolutionary product originating from the New World played a role of even greater cultural and gastronomic significance: cacao, the plant that produces cocoa beans. The indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica, including the Aztecs, had already mastered the art of transforming cacao into a bitter, frothy beverage called xocolate, which was regarded not just as a drink, but as a sacred substance. This potent beverage was reserved primarily for the nobility and warriors, symbolizing power and spiritual importance. When the Spanish conquistadors encountered this beverage, they made modifications that would alter its destiny forever. By adding sugar and spices, they created a sweetened, hot version of the drink, which soon gained popularity in Europe. By the time of the 10th century, it had become a fashionable delicacy among European aristocrats, and elaborate chocolate houses began to emerge in London and Paris, serving as vibrant centres of social life. Over the centuries that followed, innovations led to the creation of solid chocolate bars and countless confections, turning chocolate into an industry worth hundreds of billions of dollars today. Truly, all of this illustrious history was rooted in a humble, bitter drink used by ancient warrior societies. Another plant that profoundly influenced the world's cultural and economic landscape was tobacco. The indigenous peoples of North America had long used tobacco in religious rituals and regarded it as a medicinal herb capable of healing various ailments. When Europeans arrived, they initially believed that tobacco possessed universal curative powers, often attributing it to a kind of miraculous healing force. Its widespread popularity was further fueled by figures like Jean Nicot, a French diplomat in Portugal during the 15th century, who promoted tobacco use at the European court. The active alkaloid in tobacco was eventually named nicotine in his honour, highlighting its importance. As European explorers and colonists adopted tobacco smoking, its popularity rapidly spread across continents, transforming social customs and economic practices alike. By the end of the 15th century, tobacco plantations in Virginia had become the backbone of the economy for the British colonies in North America. So valuable was the crop that it was sometimes used as a form of currency, emphasizing its critical role in early North American colonial enterprises. The spread of tobacco was not limited to Europe and North America. It also found a significant foothold across the Middle East and Asia. In Turkey, Persia, India, and China, tobacco smoking became a widespread social habit long before scientific studies revealed its health risks. By then, millions had already embraced the practice, incorporating it into daily life and cultural rituals. Meanwhile, other American-born products also made their way into global markets. Vanillin, the flavor compound derived from vanilla orchids, revolutionized the confectionery industry. Native to Mesoamerica, vanilla was initially combined with chocolate by the Aztecs to produce a luxurious beverage, elevating its status to that of a prized aromatic ingredient. In Europe, vanilla became so precious that it surpassed even gold in price per weight, with only the most affluent being able to afford it. Early attempts to cultivate vanilla outside its native environment proved difficult because Europeans lacked knowledge of the crucial natural symbiosis between vanilla orchids and specific species of pollinating bees. It was only in the 19th century that technological advancements enabled artificial pollination, opening the door to vanilla cultivation in other continents and making this exotic spice more accessible worldwide. Beyond these iconic commodities, other agricultural products from the Americas gradually enriched global farming and cuisine. Sunflower seeds, pumpkins, zucchini, beans, and peanuts all played vital roles in different regions and cultures. The sunflower, in particular, became especially important in Russia, where its seeds were processed into oil, a staple for cooking and lighting. Pumpkins and zucchinis thrived across European and Asian farms, providing essential vitamins and dietary variety. Beans, with their high protein content, became affordable and nutritious food sources for the poorer classes, serving as an alternative to meat and supplementing diets around the world. Meanwhile, the peanut, despite its misleading name suggesting a tree nut, is botanically a legume. It arrived in Africa through the Columbian Exchange, where it became a crucial crop for local communities. From Africa, peanuts, along with African slaves, were transported back across the Atlantic, embedding this nut firmly into the agricultural and culinary traditions of the southern United States. In the American South, peanuts evolved into a central ingredient of regional cuisine and farming, illustrating how the Columbian Exchange facilitated not just the movement of plants, but also of people, technologies, ideas, and even diseases. This far-reaching exchange of flora and fauna was inextricably linked to the movement of human populations. Alongside plants and animals, millions of people migrated across oceans and continents, carrying their knowledge, customs, and technologies. This large-scale migration reshaped the demographic and cultural maps of the world in profound ways. It was a process driven by exploration, colonization, and economic opportunity, but it also brought with it significant challenges, including the spread of diseases that devastated indigenous populations and altered societies irrevocably. The Columbian Exchange marked a turning point in history, forging new connections and transforming the world into an interconnected web of diverse civilizations united by shared histories of discovery and exchange. The first Europeans to arrive in the Americas were the Spanish conquistadors, adventurers driven by dreams of conquest, explorers eager to carve out new territories, and second-born sons of noble families who found themselves without inheritance or prospects in Europe. These men, fueled by a relentless desire for wealth and glory, were often ruthless and fiercely ambitious, yet at the same time astonishingly courageous and daring. With only a handful of soldiers, they managed to subjugate entire civilizations, thanks largely to their technological superiority, armed with firearms and steel weapons, mounted on powerful horses capable of striking terror into their enemies, and aided immensely by the devastating effect of epidemic diseases that preceded their armies like silent annihilators. Such epidemics, particularly smallpox, typhus, and influenza, swept through indigenous populations, decimating them and facilitating conquest in ways that no mere military might could accomplish alone. For example, Hernán Cortés, leading a relatively small force of approximately 500 men, succeeded in conquering the mighty Aztec Empire with an estimated population ranging between 15 and 20 million inhabitants. This achievement, which initially might seem utterly improbable, was made possible not only by military tactics or alliances, but significantly by the catastrophic impact of Old World illnesses that spread rapidly ahead of the conquistadors, leaving indigenous armies and towns weakened and demoralized beyond repair. As Cortés laid siege to Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, an epidemic of smallpox was raging within, claiming the lives of Emperor Moctezuma and many of his key generals. The indigenous defenders, struck by grief and chaos, found their resistance collapsing under the weight of disease, unable to mount an effective counterattack. Similarly, Francisco Pizarro, with an even smaller band of men, managed to overthrow the vast Inca Empire, and once again, epidemics played a crucial role in paving the way for conquest. Smallpox had already reached the highlands of present-day Peru before the arrival of Pizarro's forces, devastating the local population and claiming the life of the Inca ruler, Capac. His death ignited a brutal civil war among the Inca heirs, further weakening the empire's cohesion. When Pizarro finally entered the region, the Inca Empire was already considerably diminished, its armies fragmented, and its political structure riven with internal strife, largely as a result of these deadly epidemics and internal conflicts. The entry of the Spaniards into the Americas did not go unnoticed by others seeking opportunities. Missionaries, government officials, traders, and artisans soon followed in their wake, eager to profit from the new lands. Colonial authorities made efforts to regulate and control the wave of migration and settlement, but the desire among Europeans to seek fortune, adventure, and new opportunities was too strong to stop. By the close of the 15th century, the population of Europeans in the New World had already reached approximately 200,000 individuals, a significant number considering the relatively short time since contact. However, the largest forced migration in history, transatlantic slavery was a brutal phenomenon driven by the urgent need for labour on colonial plantations, especially after the devastating demographic collapse of indigenous populations caused by disease. The indigenous peoples, either dying in large numbers or no longer suited for the grueling work associated with sugar and tobacco plantations, could not meet the labour demands of the expanding colonial economy. European nations and traders therefore turned their attention toward Africa, where a well-established system of slavery already existed. The first African slaves arrived in the Americas as early as the beginning of the 15th century, but it was only in the subsequent centuries that the transatlantic slave trade expanded into a massive, organised operation. Over a span of approximately 3.5 centuries, from the year 1525 to 1866, an estimated 12,500,000 Africans were forcibly transported to the New World. This transoceanic trade was among the most lucrative and brutal commercial enterprises in human history, built on a foundation of immense human suffering and greed. European traders exchanged firearms, textiles, and alcohol in Africa in return for human lives, people who were then chained and packed into ships' holds under horrific conditions. The transportation itself was a nightmare. Enslaved men, women, and children were crammed into the cramped, dark holds of ships, chained like cargo, with insufficient food and water, often subjected to brutal treatment. Mortality rates during the Middle Passage ranged from 20 to 30%, as many succumbed to disease, malnutrition, or despair. For some, the suffering was so unbearable that they chose the slow death of suicide rather than endure further torment in captivity. Once in the Americas, enslaved Africans faced a life that can hardly be called living, forced into backbreaking labour on sugar, cotton, and tobacco plantations under inhumane conditions. The work was exceedingly demanding and dangerous, and the average lifespan of an enslaved person was estimated at a mere 7 years. The continuous need for fresh labourers led to a relentless influx of people from Africa, perpetuating this cycle of violence and exploitation for centuries. This transatlantic slave trade not only shaped the history of the Americas and Africa, but also played a crucial role in the economic rise of European colonial powers. The wealth generated from the trade and the plantation economies fueled the accumulation of capital essential for the subsequent Industrial Revolution. European merchants traded weapons, textiles, and alcohol for human beings in Africa, transported these enslaved individuals across the ocean, and sold them to plantation owners in the Americas. The raw materials, sugar, tobacco, and cotton, harvested by enslaved labourers, were then shipped back across the Atlantic and sold in European markets, completing a brutal and highly profitable triangular trade network. This ruthless system of commerce, built on human suffering and unimaginable cruelty, left a legacy of social and economic inequalities that persist to this day. The human cost was staggering, countless lives lost, families torn apart, and cultures irreparably damaged. The conditions under which enslaved people were transported were horrifying beyond comprehension. Crowded in ship holds so tightly that they could barely move, chained and deprived of basic necessities, often dying before reaching their destination. It was common for the mortality rate during the voyage to reach a fifth or a third of those captured, and many faced a slow, painful death, either through disease, despair, or the brutal treatment inflicted by captains and crew. The life awaiting enslaved Africans in the Americas was an existence of unrelenting toil, brutal discipline, and virtually no hope for freedom or dignity. Sugar plantation work was especially deadly, its physical demands so severe that the average lifespan of an enslaved worker was no more than 7 years. The constant demand for fresh slave labour meant that the transatlantic slave trade persisted for centuries, fueling the growth of plantation economies that generated enormous wealth for European colonisers, but at an almost unimaginable human cost. The arrival of enslaved Africans to the Americas was a momentous event that went far beyond the simple transfer of human labour. These peoples' forced migration brought with it an extraordinary blend of cultural, religious, culinary, musical, and technological influences that would leave a permanent mark on the New World. Alongside their rich traditions and beliefs, they also carried with them certain diseases to which they had developed immunity. Diseases that turned out to be deadly for the Europeans who colonized these lands. Malaria and yellow fever, transmitted by mosquitoes native to Africa, rendered tropical regions of America exceptionally perilous for the European settlers and explorers. Paradoxically, these same deadly illnesses served as a form of protection for the enslaved Africans. Colonial planters informally recognized that only the Africans could survive such diseases, making them exceedingly valuable in the brutal economic system of slavery. In some regions, such as South Carolina, the enslaved population grew so dominant that they constituted the majority of the total inhabitants. The unfortunate intermingling of Europeans, Africans, and surviving indigenous peoples generated entirely new racial and cultural groups: Métis, mulattoes, Creoles, and various ethno-linguistic communities that were unique to the American continent. These groups occupied specific places within the complex social hierarchies of colonial society, each with distinct roles and statuses. Over time, this intricate racial stratification became one of the defining features of American cultural and societal development, shaping social relations for centuries to come. The Columbian Exchange was not solely about the movement of people. This pivotal event also involved an unprecedented transfer of technologies, knowledge, and innovations. Europeans introduced to the Americas the wheel, an essential tool known to indigenous peoples, but previously unused for transportation purposes. They brought advanced metalworking techniques, particularly iron and steel metallurgy, as well as gunpowder and firearms, technologies that provided Europeans with significant advantages in exploration and conquest. The written alphabet, another European innovation, facilitated the recording and dissemination of knowledge in the new colonies. In exchange, the indigenous peoples of the Americas shared countless invaluable inventions and practices with Europeans, including the use of canoes suited for navigating rivers and coastlines, the invention of hammocks for resting and sleeping, snowshoes for traversing winter landscapes, and the cultivation and harvesting of rubber from indigenous trees. These indigenous innovations proved vital and were later adopted and adapted across the world by Europeans and other civilizations. Moreover, the methods of cultivating staple crops such as maize, potatoes, and tomatoes, native to the Americas, were embraced by Europeans, revolutionizing agriculture and nutrition in Europe and beyond. The transfer, also involving medicine, was particularly profound. Indigenous peoples possessed extensive knowledge of hundreds of medicinal plants, many of which remain central to contemporary pharmacology. The use of quinine, derived from the bark of the cinchona tree, became the first effective remedy against malaria, saving countless lives. Similarly, curare, a plant extract used by indigenous tribes as a muscle relaxant, found its way into surgical practice, transforming medical procedures. Cocaine initially served as a local anesthetic, and many indigenous herbal medicines continue to influence modern pharmacology. However, the Columbian Exchange also had darker consequences. It inadvertently paved the way for the worldwide spread of parasites, pests, and invasive species that devastated ecosystems and human populations alike. Ships sailing between continents carried rats, cockroaches, mosquitoes, fleas, and other pests, unwitting carriers of deadly diseases across oceans and into new territories, leading to pandemics and ecological upheavals. Many of these invasive species became persistent pests, challenging humanity's efforts to control their spread well into the present day. The ecological repercussions of the Columbian Exchange were immense, affecting not only ecosystems but also the very fabric of the planet's biosphere. The sudden mixing of species that had evolved in isolation for millions of years resulted in fierce competition, displacement, and sometimes the extinction of native plants and animals. European animals, such as horses, cattle, pigs, and sheep, were introduced to the Americas, often outcompeting local species and altering landscapes. European grasses and weeds invaded native prairies and fields, transforming traditional ecosystems. Many indigenous American species could not withstand the new competitive pressures and faced extinction. Conversely, in Europe, American plants transformed landscapes. The potato allowed farmers to cultivate previously unarable, poor soils. Maize, corn, enabled the expansion of livestock farming by providing a reliable and abundant food source for animals. These agricultural innovations increased productivity, facilitated economic growth, and ultimately changed patterns of land use across continents. In summary, the Columbian Exchange was an unprecedented biological, cultural, and technological phenomenon that reshaped the world in profound and often irreversible ways. It forged a new global interconnectedness, weaving together different peoples, environments, and ideas into a complex mosaic that continues to influence the course of history today. The far-reaching consequences prompted by what has come to be known as the Columbian Exchange have had an impact on the world that cannot be overstated. This historical phenomenon, which marked a pivotal point in global history, led to the massive transfer of goods, resources, and ideas between the Old World and the New World, transforming societies on both sides of the Atlantic in profound ways. One of the most noticeable outcomes was the influx of vast quantities of gold and silver imported from the Americas. This treasure, streaming into Europe in unprecedented volumes, did not merely fill coffers. It sparked a monumental upheaval in economic systems and caused a dramatic surge in the overall price levels within European markets. Over the course of approximately 2 centuries, the continent experienced a persistent inflationary trend, a phenomenon often referred to as the price revolution, which reshaped the economic landscape and had substantial social repercussions. The rise in prices affected the cost of everyday goods, causing them to multiply in value many times over. This inflationary surge stirred social unrest among various classes, reshaping societal stability and the distribution of wealth. Economic structures shifted significantly as new commodities became available, and the availability created novel markets and spurred new consumer needs. Among these products, sugar transformed from a luxury item enjoyed exclusively by aristocrats and royalty into a commonplace commodity accessible to the masses. Its widespread consumption altered dietary habits and social customs across Europe. Likewise, the cultivation and trade of tobacco established an entire industry, setting the stage for centuries of demand and production that would influence economies and societies deeply. The arrival of cacao gave birth to the chocolate industry, a product now beloved worldwide, which initially was a rare delicacy but gradually became a part of everyday life for many. These new items demanded innovative methods of cultivation, processing, and transportation, prompting a significant technological push that accelerated advances in agricultural techniques, manufacturing processes, and logistical systems. The economic repercussions extended beyond mere trade and consumption. The plantation economies of the Americas, heavily reliant on large-scale cultivation of export crops like sugar, tobacco, and cacao, were built on the backs of enslaved Africans whose forced labour became a foundational element of the global economic system. These plantation systems grew into vital components of a burgeoning world economy that was increasingly interconnected and integrated. The tremendous profits generated from the trade of colonial commodities fueled the accumulation of capital in Europe, laying crucial groundwork for what would eventually become the Industrial Revolution, a period marked by rapid technological innovation, industrial mass production, and societal transformation. The cultural influences of the Columbian Exchange were as profound and widespread as its economic effects. Across every continent, culinary traditions underwent a radical transformation. It is now difficult to imagine Italian cuisine without tomatoes, Indian dishes without chili peppers, or traditional Irish meals without potatoes. Yet all these ingredients originated from the New World's continent. The transfer of these vital foodstuffs not only changed what people ate, but also revolutionized how they prepared, served, and enjoyed their meals. Suddenly, new combinations emerged. The classic pairing of tea brewed with sugar, coffee with milk, or chocolate-based desserts, all made possible through the exchange that began after Christopher Columbus's first voyage. Language, too, experienced a significant evolution as a result of the exchange. Thousands of words derived from indigenous American languages entered European lexicons, enriching them with new vocabulary that reflected the novel flora, fauna, cultural concepts, and experiences encountered. Terms such as tomato, chocolate, tobacco, canoe, hammock, and hurricane are now everyday words in many languages, but they owe their origins to the languages of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Conversely, words from European languages made their way into Native American tongues, often replacing or overshadowing original terms, thus influencing the linguistic landscape of the Americas. Religious beliefs and practices also experienced significant shifts due to the Columbian Exchange. Missionaries and explorers sought to convert indigenous populations to Christianity, often with varying degrees of success. The result was not always straightforward Christianization, but a process of religious syncretism, whereby elements of Christian doctrine fused with local spiritual practices. In Latin America, many saints are now depicted with features reminiscent of indigenous deities, blending religious symbolism from both worlds into new hybrid forms. Similarly, the African religious traditions carried over by enslaved Africans became intertwined with Christianity, giving rise to new syncretic religions such as Vodou in Haiti, Santeria in Cuba, and Candomblé in Brazil. These spiritual systems, which combined Christian elements with African deities and rituals, became vital aspects of cultural identity for African-descended communities across the Americas. The artistic landscape also underwent remarkable changes encouraged by the exchange. European artists, inspired by newly available flora, fauna, and peoples from the Americas, began to incorporate exotic animals, parrots, toucans, and lush fruits like pineapples into their works. Depictions of indigenous peoples adorned in colourful feathered costumes and surrounded by unfamiliar landscapes became common motifs in European art. In turn, the indigenous peoples of America developed new artistic styles influenced by European artistic techniques and materials. Mexican and Peruvian Baroque churches, for instance, combined European architectural forms with local decorative traditions, such as intricate murals and carvings that reflected indigenous motifs. Native artisans learned to work with imported European tools and materials, creating hybrid artworks that bridged the two worlds, reflecting the complex cultural exchanges that characterized this period. Music, too, experienced a transformative journey. African rhythms, brought across the Atlantic through the forced migration of enslaved peoples, mingled with European melodies and rhythms, and combined with indigenous instruments and sounds. This cultural fusion fostered the emergence of entirely new musical genres such as salsa, samba, jazz, and blues. Each of these styles encapsulates a rich tapestry of the diverse influences that converged through centuries of contact, reflecting the dynamic and often turbulent history of cultural interaction initiated by the Columbian Exchange. In essence, the Columbian Exchange initiated an unparalleled process of global interconnectedness, shaping nearly every aspect of human life: economics, culture, language, religion, art, and music. The changes wrought by this exchange are still evident today, evidencing the profound and lasting influence of that moment in history. The exchange of biological, cultural, and technological elements that began with the great explorations centuries ago has left a profound and lasting imprint on our world. Over the course of history, knowledge and information were shared not only through formal channels, but also via the natural movement of peoples, plants, animals, and diseases. European scientists and naturalists, for example, dedicated themselves to studying the rich and diverse flora and fauna of the American continents, systematically cataloguing new species and developing theories to explain their origins and relationships. Notably, the pioneering work of Carl Linnaeus, who laid the foundation for modern biological classification and nomenclature, was heavily influenced by the descriptions of American plant and animal species that Europeans encountered during their expeditions. His efforts helped establish a standardized language to identify and categorize life forms, which remains in use today. In the realm of medicine, discoveries of indigenous American medicinal plants sparked revolutionary developments. Many modern pharmaceuticals trace their origins to the natural remedies utilized by Native American communities. For instance, aspirin was synthesized in the late 19th century based on salicylic acid derived from the bark of willows, plants that indigenous peoples had long used to alleviate pain and fever. These plants and their derivatives exemplify how the exchange initiated centuries ago, continues to impact contemporary healthcare and pharmacology. However, the exchange was not unidirectional. Columbus's voyages and subsequent global contact set in motion processes that continue to evolve today, propelled by the unrelenting force of globalization. These processes have significantly accelerated the movement of countless species across continents, often with devastating effects on local ecosystems. Invasive species, organisms introduced outside their native ranges, pose persistent threats to native plants and animals, sometimes leading to catastrophic ecological consequences. One striking example is the Asian long-horned beetle, accidentally imported into North America via wooden packing crates. This beetle devastates forested areas by burrowing into trees, undermining entire ecosystems and causing immense economic losses. Similarly, Africanized bees, commonly called killer bees, have been inadvertently released in Brazil and have since spread broadly across the continent and beyond, threatening both indigenous bee populations and human safety due to their aggressive behaviour. The European house sparrow and starling, initially brought by European settlers and colonists seeking familiarity, have become pervasive pests in North America, competing with native bird species for resources and disrupting local biodiversity. Conversely, the North American grey squirrel, introduced into parts of Europe, has begun to displace native European red squirrels, leading to declines in the indigenous species. Likewise, the American mink has increasingly spread throughout European waterways, often at the expense of native aquatic fauna. In North America, the presence of the American mink has virtually replaced many European populations of similar species, and the North American mink has become the dominant small predator in many regions. Meanwhile, in Canadian waters, the invasive Elodea plant quickly proliferates, choking out native aquatic vegetation and disrupting ecosystems. These examples underscore how the modern transport network, enabled by rapid technological advances, has intensified the spread of invasive creatures and plants, further complicating efforts to preserve native biodiversity. Technological innovations such as jet aircraft allow pathogenic microorganisms and viruses to traverse oceans within hours, transforming what was once a slow seasonal process into a continuous and rapid risk of disease transmission. The advent of container shipping has created ideal conditions for the dispersal of pests and plant diseases, with ships and cargo acting as vectors. Climate change adds yet another layer of complexity, altering natural habitats and creating new ecological niches that invasive species can exploit, facilitating their expansion further. Diseases too continue their relentless global journey. Infectious illnesses such as HIV/AIDS, atypical pneumonia, Zika virus, and COVID-19 follow ancient routes established during Columbus's era, but now they spread with unprecedented speed. What once took years to reach distant lands can now occur within weeks or even days, thanks to modern transportation networks and interconnected societies. The global food system remains especially vulnerable to these processes. Monocultures, large-scale plantations of a single crop variety, are particularly susceptible to widespread disease outbreaks. The Irish potato famine of the 19th century, caused by the Phytophthora fungus, is a stark reminder of how dependent modern agriculture is on a few genetic strains, making entire nations liable to famine if those strains are compromised. The banana industry has experienced similar catastrophes. Two major fungal diseases have repeatedly devastated plantations. The dominant cultivar, Gros Michel, which commanded the global market in the early 20th century, was wiped out by Panama disease. It was replaced by the Cavendish variety, which initially appeared resilient, but now faces its own threat from a new strain of the same fungus. Coffee cultivation was severely affected when coffee rust, Baedesis spp, was introduced to Sri Lanka during the 19th century, destroying countless coffee plantations. Today, this disease threatens coffee-growing regions worldwide, and climate change exacerbates the problem by creating conditions conducive to disease proliferation in various agricultural zones. In response, modern agriculture employs advanced methods to combat these threats. Genetic modification aims to develop disease-resistant crop varieties, while biological control methods are increasingly used to manage pests and pathogens. Nonetheless, this ongoing arms race, man striving to outpace nature, is fraught with uncertainty and unpredictability. The long-term effectiveness of these measures remains uncertain, as microorganisms evolve rapidly, often overcoming human defenses. The social consequences of this ongoing exchange are just as profound and far-reaching. Racial tensions and disparities rooted in the history of colonization still manifest across the Americas, where issues of inequality persist. The unequal distribution of wealth and opportunities between developed and developing nations fuels global tensions, while conflicts over land and natural resources threaten stability in many regions. These challenges are direct legacies of the centuries-old contact initiated during the Columbian Exchange, which reshaped societies and ecosystems alike, leaving behind complex layers of social, economic, and environmental issues that continue to influence our world. In summary, the profound and multifaceted impact of the initial Columbian Exchange persists to this day. It has fostered an era of unprecedented biological, ecological, and social interconnectedness, an interconnectedness that is both a source of innovation and a cause of new vulnerabilities. The movement of species and diseases across the globe, driven by technological progress and climate change, underscoring our shared responsibility to manage and mitigate the consequences of this age-old exchange. The origins of many contemporary global issues trace back over 5 centuries to a series of pivotal events that dramatically reshaped the entire world. The indigenous peoples of the Americas, for centuries living on diverse and rich lands, continue to engage in ongoing struggles to have their rights recognized and to preserve their unique cultures and traditions. Tragically, during the centuries following the arrival of Europeans, countless native tribes vanished entirely. Their languages, once vibrant carriers of their histories and beliefs, fell silent, and their centuries-old customs and traditions gradually faded into oblivion. This cultural extinction persisted throughout history, though the pace of such losses slowed in later centuries. Yet the threat of disappearing cultural identities still lingers today. Similarly, the descendants of African slaves, forcibly brought across the Atlantic to the New World, have been engaged in relentless efforts to overcome the long-lasting scars left by slavery. For generations, they have grappled with systemic racial discrimination, a legacy of hatred and dehumanization that was embedded into the fabric of society. Economic disparities persist, with formerly colonized nations still facing stark inequalities, while social injustices rooted in racial and class divisions continue to impede progress. These enduring issues are part of a profound inheritance from a dark past when human beings were commodified, bought, and sold as if they were mere property. The economic disparities between formerly colonized nations, often rich in natural resources, and the colonial powers that once dominated them remain painfully evident today. Many Latin American and African countries still act as suppliers of raw materials, exporting agricultural products, minerals, and other resources to developed nations. In return, they receive only a minuscule fraction of the profits generated from these trades, while the majority of the wealth is accumulated by the industrialized nations. This persistent pattern echoes the economic structure established during the age of exploration and colonization, creating a cycle of dependency and inequality that endures in modern global trade. In many ways, contemporary international commerce still reflects the same patterns that emerged during the Columbian Exchange, an historic process that began over 5 centuries ago, reaffirming long-standing global imbalances. Developing countries today continue to export primarily the raw materials of their land, such as coffee, cacao, fruits, and various minerals, while importing manufactured goods, advanced technologies, and industrial products from the wealthier nations. This trade structure sustains a global order where disparities in wealth and development are perpetuated, hampering equitable growth. Yet, it is crucial to recognize that the Columbian Exchange was not merely a story of exploitation and hardship. It also served as a catalyst for forming our modern world, bringing about a remarkable cultural interconnectedness and diversity. The transfer of foods, spices, arts, and ideas across continents gave rise to a rich tapestry of cultures that interact and evolve today. For example, the widespread enjoyment of Italian pizza topped with ripe tomatoes, the aromatic coffee beans cultivated in the mountains of Central and South America, and the luscious chocolates made from cacao beans originating in the heart of Mesoamerica. All of these delights are direct results of the exchanges that began 5 centuries ago. This vast interchange laid the foundation for a global culture rooted in shared ingredients and traditions, an interconnected web that continues to influence our daily lives. Despite the ongoing loss of many biological species, the planet's biological diversity has, in some respects, increased due to this historic exchange. When plants and animals are introduced into novel environments, they often undergo rapid evolutionary changes, leading to the emergence of new subspecies and sometimes entirely new species. The famous Galapagos finches, whose variety and adaptations contributed significantly to Darwin's formulation of the theory of evolution, are believed to have evolved from bird populations introduced from different parts of the world, intentionally or unintentionally, through human activities. Modern science actively investigates the profound biological consequences of this long-standing exchange. Researchers focus on understanding biological invasions, the process by which non-native species spread into new habitats, and aim to predict their ecological impacts. This knowledge is vital, especially today, as globalization accelerates the movement of species across borders, often leading to ecological disruptions, extinctions, and economic costs. Developing effective methods for controlling invasive species and mitigating their effects has become a critical component of environmental management, as the tendency for new species to spread at unprecedented rates continues to grow. Studying the Columbian exchange provides crucial insights into how human actions can profoundly alter ecosystems. Such historical experience serves as a warning regarding the potential consequences of modern human activity on the environment, including climate change, pollution, and habitat destruction. For example, past instances reveal that isolated ecosystems are particularly vulnerable to the invasive species introduced through trade. The islands of Madagascar, New Zealand, and the Hawaiian archipelago serve today as living laboratories, experiencing their own versions of the Columbian exchange, where unique endemic species are at risk of being displaced or driven to extinction by new arrivals. Understanding how species adapt to new environments and how ecosystems respond to invasive species aids in developing strategies for conserving biodiversity. Knowledge gathered from historical examples helps scientists predict how different species might behave as climate conditions shift globally. This understanding becomes especially relevant as we face increasing environmental pressures that threaten fragile ecological balances. Furthermore, the Columbian exchange offers a powerful example of how seemingly small decisions or events could trigger vast ripples across history. The decision by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand to fund Christopher Columbus's voyage, an ambitious endeavour aimed at reaching Asia, ultimately reshaped the course of world history in ways that could hardly have been foreseen at the time. The voyage, initiated by a desire for wealth, power, and territorial expansion, led to the contact between vastly different worlds, setting in motion processes of exchange, conflict, and transformation that continue to influence the planet's destiny today. Thus, the foundational act of exploration and conquest carried within it both monumental opportunities and profound consequences, shaping societies, economies, and environments in ways that still define our present and future. The deep roots of this monumental event serve as a testament to how human choices, whether driven by curiosity, greed, or desire, can alter the course of history in unpredictable and far-reaching ways. This serves as a vital reminder of the profound impact that the decisions made in today's world can have on our environment, biotechnology, and the global economy. In our current era, we stand both as witnesses and active participants in what can be described as a new chapter of what might be called the Columbian exchange, an extensive and complex process that continues to shape our planet in unprecedented ways. Advances in genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and artificial selection are producing novel forms of life, whose potential for widespread dissemination across the Earth raises important questions about ecological and social consequences. These emerging biological phenomena could mirror, in their significance, the profound and far-reaching effects of the original Columbian exchange, which radically altered the course of human history. Furthermore, space exploration programs open additional avenues for biological exchange, expanding the scope of this ongoing process beyond Earth. Microorganisms now have the opportunity to journey aboard spacecraft, carrying earthly life to distant planets, or perhaps even bringing extraterrestrial organisms back to our home planet. This prospective cosmic exchange echoes the patterns of biological transfer seen historically, but on a scale and complexity that challenge our understanding of ecology and planetary boundaries. The possibility of encountering life from other worlds, or unintentionally introducing terrestrial species into extraterrestrial environments, constitutes a new frontier in this global and interstellar exchange. Studying the Columbian exchange remains crucial for comprehending the resilience of ecological systems. Some ecosystems have demonstrated an admirable capacity to incorporate newly arrived species without catastrophic disruption, thus maintaining their integrity over centuries. Others, however, have experienced devastating collapse or irreparable damage, unable to adapt to the rapid and often invasive influxes of foreign flora and fauna. Understanding the underlying factors that determine whether a particular ecosystem can sustain such changes is essential for developing informed conservation strategies. Recognizing these factors can guide us in protecting vulnerable environments and aiding their natural adaptation, thereby fostering a more sustainable coexistence with the biological diversity surrounding us. The cultural dimension of the Columbian exchange also continues to resonate profoundly within our contemporary society. The globalization of cultural practices, the widespread dissemination of languages, and the migration of ideas are all ongoing processes that trace their roots to the interactions initiated roughly 5 centuries ago. Today, the rapid rise of the internet and social media platforms accelerates these cultural exchanges to an unprecedented degree, creating a highly interconnected world. In the realm of popular culture, references to this historical period are abundant. Movies portraying the conquest of the Americas, novels depicting the adventures and struggles of conquistadors, and video games simulating the conquest and colonization of new lands. Such representations highlight our persistent fascination with this pivotal era, which laid the groundwork for the modern globalized society we inhabit. Nevertheless, it is critical to remember the human costs associated with these historic processes. The Columbian exchange, while responsible for fostering global connectivity and cultural blending, also inflicted immense suffering. Millions of indigenous peoples perished due to violence, disease, and the destruction of their civilizations. Entire societies and ways of life were forcibly erased, and continents were subjected to domination and exploitation. These tragedies serve as stark reminders that historical progress often comes at a significant human price. It is essential to confront and acknowledge these dark chapters of history, resisting any tendency to romanticize or gloss over the suffering inflicted during the age of great explorations. Today, efforts to restore and protect traditional ecosystems frequently confront the legacy of the Columbian exchange. Invasive species, introduced intentionally or accidentally, have become so entrenched within many habitats that their removal often poses more risks than benefits. In some cases, native ecosystems have adjusted to and even integrated these new species over generations, making a return to previous conditions increasingly impractical or impossible. This situation does not imply that conservation efforts are futile. Rather, it underscores the necessity of understanding that modern ecosystems are the products of an extended history of human interaction with nature. Effective environmental stewardship must, therefore, incorporate this historical perspective, acknowledging that ecological systems are dynamic and resilient, capable of adapting in ways that may have seemed unimaginable centuries ago. The Columbian exchange also revealed the crucial importance of biological diversity for maintaining ecological stability. Ecosystems comprising a wide array of species have generally demonstrated greater resilience against invasions by new organisms, thanks to their complex networks of interactions and redundancies. Today, as global biodiversity faces unprecedented threats due to habitat loss, climate change, and pollution, these lessons resonate more urgently than ever. Preserving genetic diversity, especially among cultivated plants and their wild relatives, is vital for the ongoing development of resilient agricultural systems. History has shown us that many of the most valuable traits of domesticated crops, such as drought tolerance, pest resistance, and adaptability, originate from their wild counterparts in the Americas. Incorporating these genetic resources into modern agriculture can help us build a more secure and sustainable food supply for future generations. In conclusion, the Columbian Exchange remains one of the most transformative events in the history of our planet. Its ripple effects extend far beyond the early days of exploration and colonization, influencing ecosystems, cultures, economies, and technologies even today. Recognizing its complex legacy is essential for understanding the interconnected nature of our global reality. The lessons learned from this historical process, both its positive contributions and its tragic consequences, should guide our efforts to promote sustainable development, protect biodiversity, and foster cultural understanding, ensuring that the mistakes of the past do not repeat themselves. Throughout history, one individual has profoundly transformed the very fabric of life on Earth, fundamentally reshaping the planet's biological diversity, establishing the foundations of the modern global economy, and laying down the roots of a shared cultural identity that spans continents and societies. This singular figure's influence is so vast that the repercussions of his actions are felt continuously in our daily lives, every time we choose what to eat, what clothes to wear, or what languages to speak. The ripple effects of his endeavours serve as an enduring testament to the remarkable interconnectedness of our world. However, along with these transformative benefits, this process of exchange, often referred to as the Columbian Exchange, also starkly revealed the fragility and vulnerability of isolated ecosystems and civilizations. When different regions, previously separated by vast oceans or insurmountable mountains, suddenly came into contact, their unique environments and societies faced new risks and challenges. What had once been secluded worlds, resilient in their independence, found themselves exposed to external influences that could destabilize or even threaten their very existence. This dance of exchange, while enriching, also underscored the peril that accompanies increased connectivity. The significance of this lesson is more relevant today than ever before. As humanity faces unprecedented global issues, such as the alarming pace of climate change, the alarming decline of biodiversity in countless ecosystems, and the rapid spread of pandemics, the history of cross-cultural and ecological exchange serves as a vital reminder. It underscores the idea that the planet functions as an intricately woven web, where the actions or disruptions in one part inevitably resonate across the entire system. No nation, community, or individual can remain truly isolated in a world characterized by continuous, complex interactions. This notion reinforces the importance of understanding the history of these global exchanges. Recognizing how past events unfolded, why they happened, and what consequences they brought allows us to better anticipate future challenges. It offers lessons on what to avoid and how to build resilience in the face of crises. By studying the long-term impacts of past exchanges, we can develop informed strategies, reduce the risk of repeating past mistakes, and foster a more sustainable relationship with our planet. The story of the Columbian Exchange is far from being a chapter in history that closed centuries ago. It is an ongoing narrative that continues to shape our lives today. Every day, when we indulge in a serving of crispy French fries or sip a steaming cup of coffee, we participate, regardless of our awareness, in the human-driven process that began more than 5 centuries ago on the sandy shores of a small Caribbean island. These familiar acts serve as enduring reminders of how interconnected our world has become, and they highlight the profound influence of such exchanges on the evolution of societies, environments, and cultures over generations. In essence, the globalized world we inhabit today is a product of that initial, momentous interaction, an interaction driven by exploration, trade, and the curiosity of those pioneering spirits who bridged oceans and continents. Understanding the history of these exchanges is crucial, for it reveals the deep links between our actions and their long-term consequences. Recognizing this interconnectedness can help us approach future challenges with greater awareness and responsibility, ensuring that we preserve the delicate balance of life on Earth for generations to come.